Welcome to the Clearly Christian Podcast with Dr. Cy Smith. It's time to know more so you can say no more. It's time for the Clearly Christian Podcast. Here's your host, Dr. Cy Smith.
I'm Dr. Cy Smith, and this is Clearly Christian, a podcast about what it means to see the world from God's perspective and the impact this has on training the next generation to live a life consistent with a biblical worldview. If you've been listening and you like what you hear, I hope you'll hit that subscribe button or leave a review. That'll let others know the show's worth checking out and help spread the word and serve our mission to make a difference. So thank you for being here, and thank you for helping us to advance the cause of Christian education. All teachers have seen that blank look. It's the look students give when they just don't understand. We see it even after we've explained something a dozen different ways. So few things are better in the teaching business than hearing a child say, "Oh, now I get it." Walking a student through the learning process and seeing them understand an important concept for the first time is a big win for teachers. It's motivating and exciting for children to learn something new. And it's equally exciting for teachers who guide them in this discovery. Good teachers don't give up during this process because they know that kids are curious by nature. They want to know why things work the way they do and how this information is useful in their lives. When students learn something new for the first time, it's a powerful experience that stays in their long-term memory. As human beings created in God's image, this is how we're wired from birth. Our minds and our hearts are inseparably linked, designed to seek truth and meaning and purpose. We seek both knowledge and understanding. It's just who we are. We want important information to live in this world, and we also want answers to bigger questions, such as, how did we get here? What happens when we die? What's the meaning of life? What's wrong with the world? And what's the best way to live? This is one of the reasons why Christian apologists such as Charlie Kirk are so popular with young people. They followed Charlie and respected him for many reasons, but chiefly because he was confidently providing intellectual answers to their questions and doing so in a manner that showed value for them as fellow humans. Remember, surveys show the number one reason for young people not coming to Christ as adults is intellectual skepticism from unanswered questions. Teachers see this every day, and one of the primary blessings of teaching in a Christian school is grounding what children learn in a biblical worldview. Teachers in Christian schools don't just teach the same information as every other school and tack on biblical principles or examples to make it Christian. All truth is God's truth. So these teachers immediately work from a biblical frame of reference, making sure that students know and understand what God intended for them to learn about this or that. So what does this actually look like in the classroom? How do teachers pull this off in subjects like math or STEM? Well, that's the conversation we're going to have today with elementary teacher Mr. Josh Davis, who's faced with this challenge every day. Josh Davis is a husband, father, STEM educator, and a worship pastor based here in Mansfield, Ohio. He serves at Mansfield Christian School, where he teaches nearly 400 students from kindergarten through 6th grade and leads hands-on STEM programs that encourage curiosity, problem solving, and a deeper appreciation for God's design and creation. Mr. Davis is passionate about helping students see that faith and science are not in conflict, but work together to reveal truth and purpose. So whether he's building projects or leading worship or teaching in the classroom, his desire is to help people grow in their faith, think critically about the world around them, and live with purpose for God's glory. So, Josh, great to have you here from our elementary school at MCS. So welcome to the Clearly Christian Podcast.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Glad to be here with you.
Yeah, appreciate that. Today I want to talk about kids. I want to talk about curiosity. I want to talk about the truth and what teaching from a biblical worldview really looks like in the classroom. So that's where we're going to go today. So first, Josh, tell us a little bit about your journey, how you came to the classroom, and what you do you teach here, and why you do what you do.
Great, yeah. Well, thank you again for having me. I've been teaching for 5 years now here at Mansfield Christian School. Excited to be a part of this family here, and just a wonderful, every day is a wonderful opportunity to experience children unwrapping and exploring areas that they never thought they could even explore. It's fantastic to see how, as a non-traditional college student myself, I went from the hospitality industry, years in that, managing multi-million-dollar properties, and teaching adults how to be empathetic towards one another, how to work with individuals. And now I get to do that same thing with children, how to communicate, how to collaborate, how to be creative and work with one another at different ages, from kindergarten through 6th grade. And it's been a wonderful opportunity, as I said earlier. My goal as an educator is to enlighten children, enlighten them to the point where they can see that they've been given the ability to create and explore areas that are that maybe we as educators nowadays are saying, well, we're going to go through this process and this is how we're going to do it. I'd rather find out what they're curious about and then connect what we need to teach them to those curiosities. This is equipping them to be better leaders in the future and connect real world issues and how to solve those issues at this age, even whatever age that might be.
Yeah, great, man. I didn't know you were in the hospitality industry. If I did, I probably forgot it. So that's great. How many years were you doing that prior to coming into the classroom?
10 years. 10
years. Okay, so you've got a good background there. So when I present books like Unreasonable Hospitality, you're on it.
Oh, I ate that up. Yes.
You ate that
was
up.
amazing. It was
great,
wonderful.
Great. Yes, if you're listening and you're a business person, you haven't read Unreasonable Hospitality, do so. Even in education, it's really sweeping our field right now. Well, you said 2 words there that really stuck out to me that I loved. Unwrapping. I don't think I've ever heard that. When it talks about, kids learning and, of course, exploring. That's a popular word, but I think they both go hand in hand. I love that word picture of unwrapping because it just that's such a childlike thing, right? Whether it's Christmas presents or candy or birthday gifts, unwrapping something and discovering something new, man, that's a great word picture. And so I mentioned in my opening along those lines about getting kids to that got it moment. Sometimes teachers will say the aha moment or something like that when you finally understand something new. So tell us about that process from a teacher's perspective. How does that natural curiosity really drive them to learn?
So curiosity is one of the greatest motivators for children. It's what we base our entire thinking off, even as adults. Why does this work? Why is this happening? Why did my lawnmower break down and it doesn't work anymore? I have to go tinker with it. Am I out of gas? Is a spark plug bad? Right? Like those curiosity is something that we have been given as a gift from God. It helps us take moments and think about why something is not working or why something is working. I remember as a child myself, having moments where I would go and to science museums and hands-on experiments in classes. And those were the greatest moments I think back of as a child. I go, I learned more doing those hands-on projects and figuring out things for myself than necessarily studying rote memorization of some sort and thinking through how to spell a word or how to write a paragraph, but exploring why it is I need to write a paragraph this way, or exploring why it is I need to build something this way in order for it to be stable so it doesn't fall over. Those moments were those curiosity moments were the greatest moments that drove me. So I believe that curiosity is one of the greatest motivators still today for students. That coupled with the ability to make mistakes. When students come into my classroom, one of the things that I teach them right up front is something that my 5th and 6th grade teacher taught me. And I always say it in a goofy voice to them, but today I'll just remain here with us. Mr. Randall would say, Mr. Davis, if you're not making 50 mistakes a day, you're not learning. And whether I believe that to that extent, I don't know. But I'll say that to my students because so many times the world has put so much pressure on them to get it right the first time. If you don't do this way, you don't do this way, you're not getting it right. But I think back to famous inventors and famous engineers. Edison created so many light bulbs before he created the one that actually worked. And so students understand that drive for curiosity and the ability to make mistakes is going to be key for their success in my class, at least. That is, when I think about how that curiosity impacts their view on learning, it's very easy and natural to connect that to stories of individuals in the Bible. And we can see how David messed up. We can see how Paul messed up. We can see how Timothy doubted. We can see how Peter failed. And those moments naturally happen in the Bible. And because it's truth and we can base it off that truth, it makes it easy to teach that mistakes and curiosity are part of STEM, are part of education.
I think every parent can certainly relate to what you just said. Because, boy, if you've had a child, you know that they went through that time period in their life where everything was why. I mean, they go through, I don't know if it's ages 2, 3, 4, I'm not really sure what it is, but every child does that. So, I mean, for anybody to say that's not innately part of your human person, you're denying the obvious. And that's what's so great about, especially teaching in elementary, because you get things for the very first time. And they assume they know it all by the time they get to high school. But you and I know that that's not the case. But you're genuinely getting them, really raw in many cases, where everything from learning to read to learning to write to learning, obviously math and, the multiplication. It's a really amazing thing that we get to do in education in terms of, getting to introduce knowledge and understanding, which is, fantastic, of course, and what we're all about here, for the very first time, and hearing those why questions. Any great examples of questions you've heard over the years that you're like, wow, that's impressive for a child to ask that question, because their mind is, even at that young age, has really impressed you that they're thinking even further than you anticipated at ages, 10, 11, and 12 or something like that.
Absolutely. I mean, I just yesterday, I had a student come to me and ask me a question about a Lego brick. So simple. And he said, "Do you know what this Lego brick is called, Mr. Davis?" And I go, "I don't, but will you tell me?" And he said, "Well, do you see how there's 2 dots here and there's 2 dots here? This is a 2x2 Lego brick." And then he proceeded to teach me and grab another Lego brick of a different size. And he says, "Look at this one." This was a first grader. And he said, "Do you know what this one is now called?" And I said, "Well, this would be a 1x6 brick." And he goes, "That is correct. You've got the correct answer, sir." Those types of questions, it makes me enlightened. Like when the student challenges me to understand something that I knew it was a 2x2 brick, but I didn't know that's what he was asking me for. Right. I thought there was a special name he knew it as. Right. Yes. I had that simple of a question, all the way to just a couple weeks ago, we had a student ask me out of the blue, "Mr. Davis, what do you think about evolution? Do you believe in evolution?" And I said, "No, I don't. Do I believe that things can adapt to their environments? I believe so. I believe that Arctic rabbits will shed their fur or change their fur color to blend into snow during certain seasons, and in other seasons they'll shed that and change it to a brown color. That's adaptations to their environments. So we do the same thing. We get goosebumps when our body needs to warm up. It's a way of actually retaining heat in, and we think it's cold, but we're retaining our heat inside our bodies." I said, we adapt to our environments. It's the same thing when we walk into a dark room, our eyes, our pupils dilate and they get bigger, and so to allow more light in. And I said, let me ask you a question. I had taken my watch off my wrist and held it like this. I said, if I took this watch and looked at all the parts and took it apart and took everything apart and put everything in a brown paper bag, and then closed the brown paper bag and shook it up for, let's just say 1,000 years. If I could do that, if I could stand here and shake the bag for 1,000 years, what's the probability, what's the possibility of me getting my watch out of the bag, put back together? Everyone in the room fell silent. And the student that asked me the question, he goes, "That would never happen." I said, "Exactly." I said, "Everything has order. This watch had order. It would put it together in a certain sense. Evolution doesn't prove that. Our Bible does." And that allowed him to see just firsthand how to quickly allowed him to see how I would answer the question, but gave him the ability to also answer that question if somebody were to ask him.
Yeah, it's great. Great example. A good segue into my next question then. You've taught both math and STEM from, in the elementary, multiple levels, things like that.
Yes.
Give the audience who might be, hearing this, wow, they've never talked to an elementary teacher who does this from a biblical worldview. Give us an example of maybe teaching a concept from a biblical worldview at the elementary level. And you just did in that easy example, but what might be something that you say, yep, this is part of just the curriculum in Christian schools?
Yeah. So for me, you have to be intentional. All right. Intentionality is the key for biblical world integration. And if you're not intentional, it will fly away. So you have to think through and be prepared. Right. I believe the Bible talks about us being prepared. Right. We have to be able to answer, be ready to have the answer to these questions that come up. And this isn't even far from what we would learn in college as educators. If you study certain theologians, Dewey said, you have to be able to plan these things. If you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. Sort of. That was something that he talked about. You have to be intentional about these things. And so for me in STEM, I'll take STEM for a moment. Our sixth graders are getting ready to put on we've been working through this process for a STEM fair, and this will be our third year doing this. And we specifically look at a Bible verse for each of their projects. Each student has to find a way to connect a Bible verse, but then what we do is I ask them, so how is that your biblical worldview? I said, you're showing me what the Bible says, but that's not your view. How does that tie? What does that Bible verse say about your project? So if they were doing I had a student that's doing something with cows, believe it or not, and they're studying how to make a ramp that allows cows to get in and out of certain areas, and I don't remember the exact verbatim or vernacular that she uses, but this sixth grader student invented some sort of anti-slip ramp for cows so they don't hurt their hooves. And her Bible verse, talked about animals. And she said, well, I don't understand that is my biblical worldview because that's what the Bible says. And I said, but what is it telling you as a believer in Christ? And she says, well, I need to take care of animals. That's how you connect it. And that was that for her. That was an aha moment. That was that I got it moment. If we look at math, when I taught fourth grade math, it was God demonstrates over and over again that math is numbers are ordered. There is a precision about God. Just the other day, I was watching a small video about how in third world countries where water is needed to take salt water, they'll put them in unkilned clay pots, and this has been done for centuries, years, where then they'll allow that water to sift through, but the clay pot won't. And it reminded me of how we as humans were made from dirt as well originally, and from clay, and I think that's how sweat works. It allows the salts and the impurities to be extruded, but the water remains inside. And I think that's really cool to see how that all connects. One of the other things that I do for STEM that allow us, I originally thought it was going to be a classroom management tool for me, just to get them involved, because I have students constantly rotating. I have a class for 45 minutes, and then I get another class for 45 minutes. And it's just, they come in, they leave, come in, leave. And the way I kick off most of my classes is with a question of the week. And that question of the week has really allowed students to know that not only do I have questions that I'd like them to answer, but it allows them to open up and ask questions. So all of this has become intentional about how we integrate biblical worldview. And that intentionality didn't happen overnight, but little by little, you start seeing how it all connects. And I would say within the last 2 years, I've gotten way better about how to integrate that and figure out how to connect those dots for students.
Yeah, I love that both of those subjects, and you spoke to it, both of them really are focused on discovering things, right?
Absolutely.
And I think we've probably both read enough in education and in even worldview studies to know that, that's really where, the knowledge that humans have acquired or gained it's basically discovering what God already had put out there. And I can't remember if it's, Newton or one of them, Galileo, all of science is just to discover what, God already put in place. And math is the same way. And STEM is the same way, that these things are, like you said, there's a perfect order out there. And we've spent, since humanity's existed, all this time just trying to figure it out. And we're just discovering what God's already, the reality of what's already there. I love that movie, Hidden Figures, and the ladies at NASA. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but they use math, to make sure that, John Glenn lands safely at the Earth. And the ladies figure it out, and it's a great math movie. It's a great human movie, but if you're a math teacher, boy, you definitely want to show Hidden Figures because they use math, obviously, for the common good. But these principles were already there. You're just discovering those things, and that math and STEM are grounded in biblical truth.
Absolutely. It goes back to that word unwrapping. It allows these kids to unwrap these truths and find them for themselves, and they go, oh. It's the aha moments aren't the I get it moments necessarily, as much as the aha moments for me are, this is how it connects to God. It connects back to God's word. Oh, I get it now.
Yeah. Good. Well, my next question relates to a little bit what you talked about with the STEM fair, and that was good. But along those lines then, and like what I just said, this idea of working towards the common good of man and coming up with things that are for our betterment, and STEM is all about that. How do I make this better? How do I solve this problem for humanity? How do I put water in Africa, so to speak? The classic, generic example there. But what kind of projects are they coming up with? You told us about the cow, the ramp for cows. But what are some other things on kids' minds these days when it comes to helping us out?
How to grow plants, how to grow, how to take care of nature, how to pick up litter in water. We have one child that made a remote controlled boat that allows it to go and clean up litter in lakes and stuff like that, or in your pool. And we have students that are learning how to code projects. And we've talked in 5th and 4th grade about digital citizenship and how to make programs and software accessible to individuals that may not have the same type of appendages that normal people do. Maybe they don't have all their fingers, or they can't see right, or they can't hear. How do you make those applications or those software programs available and accessible to those individuals? We've talked about our fifth graders are making board games right now, and what they do is it's part of a review for something that they've learned in any of their other classes throughout the year. And so their board game has to go back, and you have to review the Aztec, or you have to review the state in the capitals, whatever it might be. Sixth graders doing the STEM fair. We've connected our first graders. I love this one. We do this for the last couple of years for Mansfield Christian, particularly. As you know, Dr. Smith, we're working on capital campaigning and getting a new high school built, and so I put that out in front of our first graders and said, if you could build a new school, what would it look like? And so they design schools with elevators that lead to huge dining halls upstairs, or petting zoos, or we have slides that get you back downstairs. We just really awesome ways to think about how you could make a student's life, even at school, even better. An indoor recess playground, or a larger cafeteria, whatever it might be. And so they think about, we go through the engineering design process, and then we talk about how could we make it even better, and then we make things out of hot glue and noodles, and that's what it turns out to look like. And so it's fun, but they very much think about how to impact other people and what it would mean for the generations to come. Our second graders, they learn about biomes and ecosystems and why it's important to take care of different biomes and ecosystems for animals and for humanity as well, and what that means for us. All across every grade level, we talk about the 4 C's: communication, collaboration, creativity, critical thinking. We talk about, in 5th grade and 4th grade, we start thinking about computational thinking, how to break items down into smaller problems in smaller parts. And, we talk about abstraction, thinking, okay, what's the big idea here? What are we trying to accomplish? And ignoring some of the smaller steps. We look at pattern recognition in problems, algorithms. What is a step-by-step process that we can implement to create this model or get this completed? And so we write that out first, or we figure that out first, then we go and implement it. And that helps them think through, how to be better partners, how to be better listeners, how to be better leaders. Because we know not everyone's going to be the leader in the sense of, they're going to be the president or they're going to be the CEO of a major company, but they can be leaders in Christ still. And how do you show gentleness? How do you show kindness? How do you show the fruits of the Spirit when you're working with people? Because that's something you're going to do your entire life.
Yeah, right, exactly. I love that. And I love those first graders are designing the new school potentially. That's outstanding. Man, if money was no object, wouldn't that be great? That's why we're praying for that transformational gift. If money was no object, we could build a school that the kids designed. And it could have in it what, within reason, what kids, think was great. I don't know if we're going to put a zoo on the, petting zoo on the top floor, but
I don't know if I'll see a goat walking down the hallway someday.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But definitely some of those other ideas are probably really neat and would help kids along the way. But
for sure.
Yeah, money's always the barrier. But wouldn't it be nice not to have that as the barrier? You mentioned the STEM fair. I thought that was a great idea. And this kind of connects this idea. You invited local leaders. So yes. What's the point in inviting them?
Well, listen, community engagement it equates honoring the hard work of the students first, but it also shows the students that they're learning what they're doing is directly connected to real people, real problems, real decision making. These students, a lot of 6th grade students, they're 12, maybe 13, maybe 11. Their world is their parents, is their home, maybe their friends, their teacher.
Yeah.
They don't see outside of that, and so when we talk about Mayor so and so or County Commissioner XYZ, they don't understand what that means, and so to bring these individuals in to this and celebrate with them, they not only see as leaders of the community what the next generation is going to be bringing to this community, but they also the students also get to see, wow, I'm not just supported by my parents or my teachers. My community really does back me up, and they want me to have a good education.
Right.
And it's huge. It's huge.
Yeah,
for them.
And that's where impacting the culture starts. This
Absolutely.
matters to people outside of MCS, and so they're glad you're doing it and making life better for everybody. So, boy, they recognize cultural impact as well. Great stuff. Well, I mentioned in the opening that children are equally curious about those bigger, issues of life because our minds and our hearts are connected. That's how God's designed humans, I said. So do you see kids hungry for truth in your classrooms or the chapel programs? What are some of those bigger questions that they say, I'm contemplating big things and I'm only, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old?
Yeah. I had a student, this week's question of the week is, what do you think the hardest part of being a child is? And it's a 2-part question. And what do you think the hardest part of being an adult is? A lot of the students would say, the hardest part about being an adult is taxes. That makes me laugh. And I said, well, you're not wrong.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's up there.
But I had a student this week, and it surprised me. It shocked me. He said, the hardest part about being a child is letting down your friends and making a mistake and not knowing how to apologize. And I said, wow, we got a lot of goofy answers with that question. And that answer was deep. It was thoughtful. It was brave. He had to be brave to say that in front of his peers. And I let him know, I said, if you'd like to know how to do that, or what that may look like, I'd be happy to sit down and talk with you a little more, or even have you meet up with your friend. Later on, he came into me and he said, my friend is angry all the time, and I wish I could do something about the anger. And I said, okay, well, why don't we lift up this anger to the Lord and begin to pray gentleness and kindness over this friend of yours? And he goes, do you think that would work? And I go, absolutely, I think it'll work. Mm-hmm. So these kids, they surprise me often surprise me that they're willing to be brave and take a risk in being real with some of these questions that are or concerns that they have, and especially in front of their peers. A whole class that takes some guts sometimes. That's just one example of, we talked about the student that asked about evolution before, and these students, they and I wouldn't say just these students at Mansfield Christian, but students that are even when I was in other school buildings and doing work, they ask big questions. They want to know truth. They're hungry for truth. And I think math helps support that truth in a really easy way. When you draw a line, I tell students, I'm like, when you draw a line, there has to be a starting point. No line can exist without a starting point. And that starting point had to have somebody start it. So you can't draw a line without that starting point, and that starting point had to have a hand and a pen in that hand doing something. So that proves to me that God has created us, that we are designed and written and put together that in itself. And those types of questions and those types of answers, those types of conversations lead to opportunities to do more than just lead students to Christ, but also teach students that you're not just saved to heaven, you're saved for something as well. And that's a big deal to them.
Yeah, it sure is. There has to be a first mover. I can't remember who said that, but it has to be a first mover, right? Yeah, things don't just spontaneously appear out of nowhere. And the only thing that we know was and is before any movers is God. And there has to be some, like you said, there has to be some starting point. And it's hard for us in our finite minds to comprehend that, but even we can understand that you can only walk it back so often before you say there has to be a beginning. In the beginning was the Word, and that's all you need to know. And and He told us that's what was, and that's what is. Well, any examples that students or activities that they're doing to really walk this out that you can say, hey, I can see how truth has impacted their life in a really tangible way. They're involved in something, maybe it's through their church or youth group or what they're doing here at school, where they're saying, I'm taking what I'm learning at school in my faith, and I'm moving this beyond the test, or I'm moving this beyond the classroom. This is a part of who I am. You can see it reflected in their biblical worldview.
Absolutely. We just recently did student council for 5th and 6th graders, I believe, were in charge. They ran a canned good drive nice. to help. I believe it was canned goods and some other, like some funding of some sort that was raised, and I don't remember the exact intrinsicies of it, but it was funding to be raised in honor of a student that had passed this past year, this school year, and to build a bench in his memory and do some things on the playground for this student. And I think that right there, they put it together. They orchestrated all that. I think that was wonderful. How beautiful of them to think outside of what they would need to honor their peer that's no longer with them, to glorify Christ in such a loving and kind way. Our sixth graders, with their STEM fair projects, many of them, one of them was, she had a heart for animals. She had a heart for cats. She's like, I see so many stray cats in my neighborhood, and in the winter they just freeze all the time, and then we end up, scooping them up and having to bury them, or, and she goes, I would love to build something for my project, Mr. Davis, that would help save these cats, and then we can give them a home somewhere and get them to the Humane Society. So she invented a cat warming house where, cats can come and be taken care of, and it would help, secure them until they get to them and allow them to get, to a safer environment. I'm like, that's them putting the creativity that's in them, the levels of kindness, the fruits of the Spirit at work outside of their responsibility as a student here at school.
Yeah, nice. Well, you've got a daughter graduating this year, and you've got,
Yes.
others who I can't keep track of their grades, but you've had others before and after. And so how have you personally as a dad even seen this play out in her life and your other kids, where you've seen them go from, raw curiosity to really digesting a biblical worldview, then to, step 3, they're really living their faith. Have you seen that in your own kids?
I have, absolutely. One of the greatest things that Mansfield Christian has done for us as a family has been, as we've partnered with this school, has allowed questions to arise in our family, things that I don't believe would have been asked, questions about the Bible, questions about understanding the Word of God. It has given my students, my children, a way to come to me as their father, or come to their mother and ask them, how would you interpret this? This is what I learned today, and this is what I was taught. And is there more to this, or what else is there than this? And one of the things that I think we've lost a lot of with society, with culture nowadays, is the ability to be empathetic toward one another. We may not understand, or we may disagree, about politics or whatever it might be, but as individuals, we've been created in the likeness and image of God, and so we have to be able to live that out in a way that treats other people with respect, loving kindness, care, and Mansfield Christian has helped open that up through its its pillars throughout each grade level, learning about grace early on and how to give grace through its life programs. Those have allowed my students, my kids, to draw closer to the Lord, draw closer to us, and have good frienchips, deep friendships.
Good. Yeah. Awesome. And finally, last question. What advice would you give for other parents, who say, hey, I hear you here. What can they do to really capitalize on that child's natural curiosity to lead them to a biblical worldview? Because I think if I was listening as a parent, that's what I hear you saying is, man, let's take what is already innately built in them by God and then use that to help them develop a biblical worldview. So maybe even some parents that you've worked with in the years in education, but, for the average mom and dad listening, what can you do to help them along in this process?
This week, I, as every parent might have done from time to time, because we're not perfect, we snap at our kids sometimes, right? I snapped at my child on Monday morning. We're just running late for school, and the Lord convicted me that morning in a meeting that I was in, actually with you, and about the gentleness that needed to be evident to everyone. And I went back and I apologized to my son, and I said, I'm sorry. I don't know if it was just the morning timing or whatever it might have been. You had no reason to be snapped at like that. I really apologize. I'm so very sorry. And I did that in front of a bunch of other students here at the school, and for a couple of different reasons. I wasn't trying to showboat my apology, but I wanted them to see that this is how you apologize and mean your apology more than just saying I'm sorry. And so that was one thing I would say for parents is like, live out Philippians 4:5. Let your gentleness be evident to all, because the Lord is near. And 2, I would say, let that curiosity flow. Let them get muddy. Let them, give them makerspace stuff. Give them cardboard and scissors and glue sticks and talk about, building a cardboard house or, castle in your living room, and let us stay up for a couple of days. Those sorts of things are great. For me in my classroom, and probably at home too, is we don't have a lot of rules, but we have a lot of procedures, right? I have one rule in my classroom: you don't talk when somebody else is talking, and that's just because I deal with kids and we like to talk. Right. But all of everything else is procedures. So as parents, I think that bleeds over into families. Be intentional about your time with your kids. Spend time. I just had a mother post something on social media where their child made a drinking contraption out of straws and used suction cups to put it on the door, and then hooked a bottle or something up to it, and she drank from the side of the door. And it was just goofy, but the child did it. And I could imagine the pop being spilled on the floor and then the sticky floor and stuff, but there was no fault in the child for that. Hey, this is such a wild creation, but way to go, you did it and it worked.
Yeah, let that mind explore. Let them connect some things. Let them build.
Exactly.
Give them some space to do that. And like you said in the very beginning, give them some space to fail, make mistakes. Yes, and don't bail them out, right? Let them figure it out and go again and try a different way, and let them stay with it. I think that's another good thing, the lesson there, that to stick with something and focus on a problem such that, you as an adult are always tempted to jump in and say, this will work, let me help you. Let them get there on their own and capitalize on that. And I think that same thing would prove true in our faith, because eventually when you really start to dig, I think it was Francis Schaeffer who said something like, as a great philosopher, hey, I don't ever mind the questions. Excuse me, because as long as kids are asking questions or people are asking questions, they're eventually going to get to the truth. And I thought that was really great and certainly has application for us as parents. Well, great discussion. Thank you again. If they want to know more about the STEM program at Mansfield Christian, or if they want to know more about Josh Davis or what it is that you do, or even just the elementary program at MCS, how can they contact you?
Well, my email is jdavis@staff.mcsflames.org. And if you email me there, that's the best way to get a hold of me. I typically email within the next 24, 48 hours and try to reply. Would love for you to, if you're interested in ever seeing what a STEM makerspace looks like, and you can come and check out the room sometime, schedule it with the central office or the elementary office and call into the school here. Thanks again for having me, Dr. Smith.
Oh, yeah, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thanks so much, and keep up the great work. Appreciate what you're doing. You're a valuable team member here at Mansfield Christian. Well, let me make 2 chalkboard points for you to consider as listeners. Consider remembering these as we just finalize this topic today. Point number 1 is this: curiosity drives learning, and the concepts that children learn for the first time typically stay with them throughout their lives. This is why it's so critical to ground what they learn in biblical truth in Christian schools. When kids hear the truth, the world and everything in it makes sense to them, and it's easier to build on that understanding. They don't wrestle with conflicting ideas or confusion about what to believe as they move through their education. They work through the evidence presented, and they understand what God intended them to learn as humans made in His image. Point number 2 is this: unanswered questions fuel skepticism. Children become skeptics at young ages because they're told that truth is personal and subjective, and the only way to find it is by looking within and pursuing your desires. Well, this doesn't work, of course, and over time, children begin to question if truth can be known at all. They start to question reality itself, and they become skeptical of any worldview that points to an absolute authority. You can't just give kids options and hope that they find something that works for them. They want the truth. They need the truth. And as humans made in God's image, they deserve the truth. Well, that's our lesson for today, and now you know more. And when you know more, you can do more. You can not only think differently, but you can act differently, make a change, live out those convictions, and say, no more if you must. Well, thank you again for joining me today on the Clearly Christian podcast, and I trust that now you know more about the importance of using our children's natural curiosity to point them to biblical truth and a worldview that sees all of life from God's perspective. If you like the show, let us know by following, subscribing, hit the like button for me. That'll let others know, again, the show's worth checking out. It certainly makes a difference. I'd really appreciate that. Remember, the only way we're going to turn things around in our country is to increase the number of people who hold a biblical worldview and then live that out. The greatest hope we have to get there is Christian education. Again, I'm Dr. Cy Smith, and this has been Clearly Christian.
Thank you for listening to the Clearly Christian podcast with Dr. Cy Smith. Hear more episodes at clearlychristianeducation.com. If you'd like more information about Christian education in your neighborhood, or if you're interested in education opportunities at Mansfield Christian School, or if you agree with Dr. Smith and want to help him in his mission to influence and awaken Christian America, you can send Dr. Smith an email through the clearlychristianeducation.com website. Message him on the Clearly Christian LinkedIn or Facebook page, or call the Clearly Christian Connection line at 419-756-5651. This has been the Clearly Christian Podcast with Dr. Cy Smith on clearlychristianeducation.com, brought to you in conjunction with Mansfield Christian School, a Bryan Media production.